If you're one of the more than 400,000 Canadians who's received a letter saying you may have to pay back your Canada Emergency Response benefit, the Prime Minister has a message. You can relax for now.
I don't want people to worry over Christmas. The system needs to be fair. You don't have to think about January 1st as any deadline.
Trudeau made that comment during his year-end interview with our chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton, addressing the anxieties being felt by many people who may have made an honest mistake in applying for the benefit because of what they say is vague language on the forms around net income and around expense deductions. The CERB was just one of many issues Rosemary and the Prime Minister talked about outside Rideau Cottage yesterday. Natalie Collada is looking at the interview in more detail. Of course, we're going to tell people where they can see the thing in full on Sunday, Natalie. But some of the excerpts that are particularly newsworthy, any more detail on that CERB repayment?
Yes, in fact, Heather, we do know a little bit more about this. So as you mentioned, 441,000 Canadians received this letter that they may have to, in fact, give that money back. And that, of course, is offering some sticker shock for some individuals. And really what this all boils down to is the eligibility qualifications, specifically one section, one line in particular on the government's website to find out if you are eligible or not. That seems to be raising some questions. And the wording is essentially if you earn $5,000 or more before taxes for the last 12 months, you were eligible for CERB. That's what it says on the website. But according to the CRA, what they meant is net pre-income tax, net pre-tax income. So if you are someone who is self-employed, for example, it's $5,000 before you have your after you have your expenses. So there's a lot of questions about exactly what this means for Canadians, whether they'll have to pay this back. That's something that Rosemary Barton really took an opportunity to put to the Prime Minister. Here's what she said. Take a look.
Would the government consider forgiving those repayments or setting up a payment plan? Like, what are you actually suggesting?
Everyone's in different situations. Yeah. We're going to work with people. We're going to look at what the options are, but I don't want people to worry about repaying these holiday seasons. So
forgiveness is a possibility for
there's
some
a range of things we're going to look at.
And one of the other things, that's kind of to put this all in perspective for everyone at home is one couple CBC spoke to says that this means they may have to pay back $19,000. That's a lot of money, Heather, as you can imagine. This is just one of many topics in Rosemary's interview.
As the Prime Minister said, they didn't give the CERB in order to claw it back. So many options are being considered, as was clear in the interview. Something else they discussed, we know, Natalie, the border between Canada and the United States, it's closed. It will be closed until January the 21st at the earliest. That's been extended again. But there was criticism at the outset that Canada did not shut down the border fast enough. What did Rosemary ask on that?
Well, she kind of addressed this point because if everyone can take a moment, I know a lot has happened, but think way back to March 21st. That's when the government of Canada announced the border with the U.S. would be closed to non-essential business. But that came several days after the Canadian government closed the border to other countries. And so there was a lot of question about whether or not Canada should close their borders sooner at the same time, perhaps as other travel to other countries was not allowed as well, and whether that would have changed the way this pandemic rolled out and the spread of COVID-19 in this country. Here's what they talked about when it came to that. Have a look.
It does seem as though there were some early cases from China and from Iran, but the vast majority of cases that came into Canada were from Europe and the United States.
Yes.
So should that have happened earlier?
But the vast majority of those cases were Canadians returning from United States and Europe. And you can't close border. You don't close the border to Canadians coming home. So that border closure wouldn't have made a huge difference. We felt that taking those 2 days to ensure the continued smooth flow of trade and a good working relationship with the United States was important.
Now, as you heard there, one of the considerations for that delay in closing the U.S. border was the trade factor that they had to negotiate with the United States to make sure goods and services were continuing to flow back across the border, because we know in Canada we rely so much on that trade. That was one of the parts of the interview. There's, of course, a lot more in this interview, and everyone can watch the full interview this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live. It airs at 10 o'clock Eastern on CBC News Network, 11 o'clock Eastern on CBC Television. So lots to talk about there, Heather, as the year-end wrap up with the Prime Minister interview is aired this weekend.
Natalie, thank you for this morning. Natalie Collada from Toronto.